What was it about the Emperor's royal guards that made Darth Vader absolutely despise them? Greetings again, Acolytes, and welcome back to the Archives. The Emperor's Red Guard find themselves in a very unique position. As the personal protectors of Darth Sidious himself, they have his very life resting in their hands. And not only that, but they are privy to the fact that their master and Vader are far more than meets the eye. The guards are fully aware of the role of the Sith, but their blind loyalty and devotion to Palpatine helps them keep this a secret. Yet despite their usefulness and loyalty to the Sith cause, Darth Vader just couldn't stand being around them. It is extremely easy to infer based on their interactions and the reaction that Vader himself gives in certain situations containing the royal guards. And to that end, we'll be using both legends and canon sources in today's holocron, so join us as we explore why Darth Vader hated those that were most loyal to his master. In the very beginning, Vader didn't actually think very much of the guards. His master had decided not to reveal himself as a Sith, and therefore needed guards to keep himself safe when in the public eye. That only made sense. And of course, it made more sense to ensure that the guards he surrounded himself with were the most capable warriors in the entire galaxy. They were trained to absolute perfection in the ways of hand-to-hand combat and weapons proficiency. Their reaction timing was on the level of a Force sensitive, to the point where many compared their physicality to that of the Jedi Knights. But they were nothing in the shadow of Darth Vader. His power outshined them all on almost every level. Vader would even be included in their training. He would go to the planet where all of the Royal Guard initiates practiced, and he would find out which one was best in their class and would challenge them to a duel. There, he would promptly kill the trainee in the ring. This was to prove that although they thought they were the absolute best the galaxy had to offer, they would never be good enough for the Emperor, and that they had to go beyond what they thought was possible. For the first couple of years, Vader paid them little mind besides when he had to interact with them directly for one reason or another. In the canon novel Lords of the Sith, Palpatine and Vader would crash land on the world of Ryloth and were forced to survive in the rebel-infested jungles. The survivors included 2 Sith Lords and 2 Royal Guards. When they had permission to remove their helmets at the camp, Vader noted that one of them was a Jango Fett clone, a veteran of the Clone Wars who had risen through the ranks and managed to make it to the Guard Force. It was the highest honor a clone like him could ever achieve, and Vader didn't actually know the clone personally, as he wasn't of the 501st, but given all of his tattoos, Vader speculated that the other trooper back in the day may have been nicknamed Ink. Vader and the guards would work together to get Palpatine to a safe Imperial outpost located on Ryloth, and it's important that the guards worked together with Vader extremely well, and didn't step on each other's toes, and we believe this was for one simple reason: a common goal. That goal is obviously the protection of the Emperor. To this end, Vader would fight right alongside the Royal Guards in a few other instances in the lore that we can find, one being when Palpatine's life was being threatened by the Hindsnake cult. Once Lord Vader had finally tracked their base to an unknown moon, 2 Royal Guards accompanied him there for the slaughter. And then there was the case of the mutiny of Grand Moff Tracta. In that situation, Vader and the Guard Force personally took out waves upon waves of traitorous stormtroopers. But again, in all of these scenarios, Vader tolerated the guards for the express purpose of keeping Palpatine safe. But this would turn out to be this one subject that worked as a double-edged sword. Their intense loyalty to Sidious was a benefit only to Palpatine. The thing that the guards and Vader soon came to realize, though, is that we are not loyal to the Empire or the institution. The guards were not even loyal to the Sith as an order, but loyal exclusively to the Emperor as an individual. As a result, they answered only to him and did not take orders from Vader without first getting express permission from Palpatine. On the contrary, they were prepared to fight against Lord Vader should it be the Emperor's wish at any command, or if it falls in line with keeping the Emperor's will. In a deleted scene from Return of the Jedi, Vader on the second Death Star approaches the turbolift to Palpatine's throne room. Flanking the door are the Imperial Guards, and in front of it is Grand Moff Jerjerrod. The Moff tells Vader that he's not allowed to enter the room, and in response to the perceived insubordination, Vader begins to force choke the Moff. At this though, the guards shift their stance and proceed to aim their pikes at Vader in hostility. Between gasping breaths, Jerjerrod informs him that it was the Emperor's wish not to be disturbed by anyone. The Dark Lord then releases the Moff and acquiesces, of course, only to the will of his master. And in response, the Royal Guards return to their neutral positioning. This is a great instance where the guards are prepared to enforce the Emperor's desire to be left alone, even against Vader, without any sort of hesitation. They most certainly would have died there, but nevertheless, they didn't cower at this show of power. This became the primary reason that Vader came to despise them. He did not like that there was a level of command within the Empire that he did not have direct access and power over. This is the same reason why he also hated the Emperor's hands. They did not take orders from him unless Palpatine expressly told them to do so. Of the Emperor's hands, Vader detested Mara Jade in particular, because Mara often used this fact as a way to blatantly undermine Vader without consequence. Although the Red Royal Guards were less ambitious than the Emperor's hands were, they were still outside of Vader's jurisdiction despite him being second only to the Emperor. As the apprentice in the Rule of Two, it was Vader's opinion that there should be nothing out of reach from him besides his own master. Sidious constantly touted that the Sith were above all. They were the rulers of the galaxy. Nothing was beyond their grasp and their will, and all would bend the knee to their power. As a Dark Lord of the Sith, Vader believed that he was not to be challenged by anyone he perceived as a lesser being, and yet, there existed a faction that did not heed him without the Emperor's express approval, and Palpatine knew this. Palpatine used it as an insult. With all of that said though, Vader was not opposed to harming or even murdering them if they failed to do their job. They existed for the sole purpose of keeping the Emperor safe and to do his bidding. If they failed in this aspect, they were less than worthless. On one occasion, Vader managed to thwart an attempt on his master's life. He had burst into Palpatine's office after learning a plot against him. Catching Palpatine by surprise, Vader force-pulled him out of his chair and threw the chair out of the window before it exploded. There had been a hidden bomb in the seat which almost successfully executed the Emperor, and for their failure in not detecting the bomb, Vader lifted the two present guards and expressed his desire to kill them slowly, but because he did not have the luxury of time, he threw them both out of the window. The rest of the royal guards rushed into the office, and upon seeing what had transpired, Vader told all of them to line up. He proceeded to scold them for their incompetence. One of the guards actually apologized and kneeled down, saying that Vader should take their head as payment. At this, all of the royal guards except for the two that kneeled down, all of those that sought penance directly from Lord Vader, accepting whatever punishment awaited them. But with that, many remained standing and refused to kneel, wordlessly expressing their protest and not accepting responsibility for allowing assassins to come so close to killing the Emperor. For their hubris, Vader relieved them both of their heads with one slash of his lightsaber. Those who bowed, he allowed to live, hoping that they had learned their lesson. Sidious approved of his guards being punished here. If Vader hadn't done so, he likely would have done so himself, and made it far more slow and horrific. Having said that, this was an extremely rare occasion in the lore. Unlike other Imperials, the Royal Guards were typically completely off limits to Vader's punishment and influence. This fueled his contempt for them, as he didn't like that not only did they not take orders from him, but they were basically untouchable. And what made Vader even more frustrated is that many of them knew this. I believe this touched a sore spot of Anakin, who remembered the time as a Jedi when the High Council ruled so many things off limits to the young Jedi. All of the knowledge he craved, all of the power that he desired, they were kept out of his reach, and he was told to suck it up. As a Dark Lord of the Sith, he was promised the galaxy and everything within it. He was told that the dark side would grant his every desire, and that nothing would be out of his grasp. The life of his wife Padme was the first instance that proved that this was a complete lie, and the limitations imposed on his body by his armor was the second. But Palpatine continues with his lie. The Royal Guards exist who are an entirely different command tier than Vader, answering only to Sidious and not to him. But to make things even worse, the Royal Guards started popping up everywhere in the galaxy. Sidious rarely went anywhere without them. They were the only beings who were allowed to fly his personalized class shuttle, or any ship that Palpatine was personally riding on. So it was almost to the point that Vader was never alone with Sidious because of their perpetual presence. It rubbed the Dark Lord the wrong way that lesser beings were clued into Sith business on the regular. In canon continuity, Palpatine makes things much worse, lending Vader his guard to be in his own home. In his castle on Mustafar, the Royal Guards stand as sentinels whenever Vader is in his bacta tank. This was when he was at his most vulnerable, and begrudgingly, he needed them there to protect him while he was without his armor. But if we had to guess, Vader knew that he was being watched by them, that Palpatine was telling him that in his most private moment, he would always be there. When Vader was at his most vulnerable, the influence of Darth Sidious would always be present. He could take him out at a moment's notice. Or at least, that's the message he was attempting to send. Vader felt watched by them, and from what we read in the comics, one of Sidious's favorite hobbies was messing with Vader. There was really no telling if or when the Royal Guards would just attack Vader on a whim. And to make matters worse, Palpatine could justify it all as a test for his apprentice. He had promised him the galaxy, and yet, within the Empire, he had elected those that were beyond Vader's power. Vader knew that he could never let his guard down for even a moment while the guards were around. But of course, he couldn't simply order them to leave him alone either, because after all, they only answered to Palpatine. But anyway, my friends, this is why Vader absolutely despised the Red Guards. From what we've described, do you believe that this distaste was a reasonable one? And would you have liked to see the deleted scene stay in Return of the Jedi to show the Guards' true loyalty to their Emperor? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. And as always, my friends, thank you so much for visiting us here in the archives today, and may the Force be with you always.